That morning in Bethesda seemed like any other Thursday in May. The sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows, casting a warm glow over the marble countertops I'd splurged on during last year's renovation. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air as I rushed to finish getting ready for work. I'm Margaret Wallace, 52, and I've spent the last 20 years building my perfume company from nothing to something I'm proud of. After losing my husband Robert to cancer 8 years ago, my business and my son Benjamin became my entire world. And when Benjamin married Clara 3 years ago, I thought God had finally sent me the daughter I never had. Clara stood in my kitchen that morning, carefully packing 2 identical stainless steel lunchboxes. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her movements precise and graceful as always. "Good morning, Margaret." She greeted me with that warm smile that had won me over from their first date. "I made that quinoa salad you loved last week, with the cranberries and feta." "Clara, you're spoiling me," I said, squeezing her shoulder as I passed. "Benjamin doesn't know how lucky he is to have you." She lowered her eyes modestly. "I'm the lucky one. Your family gave me everything." Benjamin hurried downstairs, his tie slightly askew as usual. At 30, my son had his father's height and my determination. As managing director at his financial firm, he had an important presentation that day. "Running late again," he sighed, kissing my cheek, then Clara's lips. "What would I do without you two?" Clara handed him a travel mug of coffee. "Crash and burn," she teased, straightening his tie. "Your lunch is packed. Don't skip it like yesterday. You need your strength." I watched them with a familiar warmth in my chest. After Robert died, I'd worried about Benjamin. He'd thrown himself into work, barely dating. Meeting Clara had changed everything. She'd brought light back into our lives, creating a sense of family I thought we'd lost forever. "I should head out too," I said, gathering my purse and keys. "Board meeting at 10. Clara handed me the smaller of the 2 lunchboxes. "Eat well, Mom. You work too hard." Mom. She'd started calling me that after their first anniversary, and I still remembered how my eyes had welled with tears the first time. Now it felt natural, right? "Thanks, sweetheart. See you both for dinner?" Benjamin checked his watch. "I might be late. The Westfield account." "I'll keep a plate warm," Clara interrupted. So understanding. So perfect. The drive to my office in D.C. was uneventful. Traffic crawled along the Beltway while I mentally rehearsed my presentation for the board. Spring was my favorite season in the capital, with the cherry blossoms fading and the warm weather settling in before summer's oppressive humidity arrived. My office at Wallace Fragrances overlooked the Potomac. I'd built this company from scratch, starting with homemade essential oil blends sold at farmers' markets. Now we had distribution in 37 countries. Robert had been alive to see the beginnings of my success, and I always felt he was still watching, still proud. David Miller was waiting in my office when I arrived. A retired doctor who now consulted on workplace wellness, David had become both a valued colleague and a dear friend. In his mid-60s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he reminded me of Robert sometimes. "The board's not arriving until 10, he said, glancing at his watch. "Thought we could go over the wellness initiative numbers." Once more. As we worked, noon approached, and I reached for the lunchbox Clara had prepared. "Mind if we eat while we work?" I asked, opening the container. That's when everything changed. David looked over at the contents of my lunch and froze. The color drained from his face, and for a moment I thought he might be having a heart attack. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Where did you get this?" "Clara made it," I replied, confused by his reaction. "She makes lunch for Benjamin and me most days." "Why?" His hand was shaking as he pointed at the food. "Call Benjamin right now. Tell him not to eat his lunch, not a single bite." "David, what?" "Then go to the hospital. University of Maryland Medical Center. Ask for Dr. Levine in toxicology. I'll call ahead." My heart began to race. "You're scaring me." "You should be scared." His eyes met mine, filled with a terrible certainty. "If Benjamin eats what's in his lunchbox, he could die." "What are you talking about?" My voice rose, edged with panic. David pointed to a faint white residue along the rim of the container and the slightly off-color tint to the quinoa. "That's not normal. I've seen this before. It looks like arsenic poisoning." "Arsenic? That's impossible." But even as I protested, a cold dread washed over me. "Margaret, listen to me. I was an ER doctor for 30 years before I retired. I've seen arsenic poisoning. The symptoms come on gradually. Fatigue, stomach pains, headaches, hair loss. Has Benjamin been sick lately?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "He's been having stomach issues for months. We thought it was stress from work. And he's been so tired. Call him, now. With trembling fingers, I dialed Benjamin's number. It went straight to voicemail, his presentation. He would have turned his phone off. He's not answering, I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Try his office. Try Clara. Try anyone who might reach him before he eats. I called his assistant, who promised to run to the conference room immediately. Then I called Clara. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. Margaret, is everything okay? For one breathless moment, I didn't know what to say. If David was wrong, I'd sound insane. If he was right. Clara, there's been a mix-up with the lunches, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I need to talk to Benjamin right away. Oh no, she said, sounding concerned. Did I switch them? I'm so sorry. Benjamin hasn't mentioned anything, though. He must not have opened his yet. Do you know where he is? I asked, signaling to David that Benjamin might not have eaten yet. In his presentation, I think. Is everything all right? Her voice was all innocence and concern. Everything's fine. I just need to reach him. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth. As soon as we hung up, I grabbed my purse and keys. David was already standing. I'm coming with you, he said. Bring the lunchbox. Don't touch the food inside. As we rushed to my car, the world around me seemed to blur. The sunlight that had seemed so beautiful that morning now felt harsh and revealing, illuminating a truth I wasn't ready to face. In the car, David spoke quietly. I could be wrong, Margaret. I pray I am. But we both knew he wasn't. By the time we reached the hospital, Benjamin's assistant had texted me, found him just as he was opening his lunch, told him not to eat. He's confused but complying. Calling you now. As my phone rang and I heard my son's voice, alive, well, confused, I felt a momentary relief so profound it made me dizzy. But beneath that relief, a horrifying question was taking shape. If David was right about the arsenic, who had put it in Benjamin's food? And in that moment, the answer was already forming in my mind, too terrible to acknowledge, too devastating to deny. Mom, what's going on? Benjamin's voice crackled through my phone as David and I hurried through the hospital entrance. Jasmine practically tackled me before I could eat lunch. She said you called and sounded terrified. Benjamin, listen to me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need you to come to the University of Maryland Medical Center right now. Don't ask questions, just come. Is it Clara? Are you hurt? The immediate concern in his voice broke my heart. He had no idea that his wife might be the very person trying to harm him. I'm fine. Please, just come. I'll explain everything when you get here. David had already spoken to Dr. Levine, a toxicologist and former colleague. By the time Benjamin arrived, looking bewildered and alarmed in his tailored suit, a team was already analyzing the contents of the lunchbox. Benjamin's face paled when he saw me sitting in the consultation room with David and Dr. Levine. Mom, you're scaring me. What's happening? I took his hands in mine. How do you tell your only child that the woman he loves might be trying to kill him? That the life he thought he was building might be built on the most monstrous lie? Benjamin, Dr. Levine is going to run some tests on you. I need you to cooperate fully. Tests for what? His eyes darted between us. Is this about the stomach? Pains? I told you, it's just stress and poor eating habits. Dr. Levine, a solemn woman with cropped gray hair and penetrating eyes, spoke directly. We're testing for arsenic poisoning, Mr. Wallace. Benjamin laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Arsenic? That's ridiculous. Who would poison me? The question hung in the air, unanswerable for now. Your mother brought in your lunch, Dr. Levine, I continued calmly. The preliminary tests show concerning levels of what appears to be arsenic. We need to confirm with blood tests, hair samples, and nail clippings from you. Benjamin's laughter died. This is insane. There must be some mistake. I hope so, I whispered, squeezing his hands tighter. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical jargon, blood draws, and stunned silence. Benjamin submitted to the tests without further protest, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. When his phone rang, Clara calling, he looked at me helplessly. Don't tell her where we are, I said softly. Not yet, he answered, his voice surprisingly normal as he explained he was handling an emergency with a client and would be home late. The ease with which he lied shocked me until I realized he was protecting himself from a truth he wasn't ready to face. Dr. Levine returned as Benjamin ended the call. Her face told us everything before she spoke. The preliminary results confirm it. Mr. Wallace, you have elevated levels of arsenic in your system. Not immediately life-threatening, but concerning. The pattern suggests low-level exposure over months, possibly longer. Benjamin sat, motionless, his face ashen. That's impossible. The food in your lunchbox contained a significant amount, she continued. Had you eaten it today, you would likely have needed emergency treatment. Whoever has been poisoning you appears to have increased the dose. Poisoning me, Benjamin repeated, the words hollow. Who would... He stopped, realization dawning in his eyes. No, not Clara. She wouldn't. She couldn't. I moved to sit beside him, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. Benjamin, I don't want to believe it either. Then don't, he snapped, pulling away. This is crazy. Clara loves me. We're trying to start a family, for God's sake. David, who had been silent until now, spoke gently. Benjamin, I understand your reaction, but we need to consider all possibilities. Has Clara been preparing most of your meals? Benjamin nodded reluctantly. She likes to cook. She's always worried about my health, makes sure I eat regularly. And your symptoms started a few months after we married, Benjamin whispered, the realization hitting him visibly. But that doesn't mean anything. Correlation isn't causation. You taught me that, Mom. We should call the police, Dr. Levine said, reaching for the phone. No, Benjamin and I said simultaneously. Dr. Levine frowned. This is attempted murder. We need proof, I insisted. Real proof, not just suspicion. Benjamin's phone rang again. Clara, again. This time, he didn't answer. What do we do? He asked, looking utterly lost. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking protection I'd always been able to provide. Until now. You can't go home, David said firmly. Not until we know more. But if I don't, she'll know something's wrong, Benjamin argued. An idea formed in my mind. Tell her you've been sent on an emergency business trip. That client in Chicago you mentioned last week. Say you had to leave immediately. Benjamin nodded. Slowly. And then what? Then we find out why your wife might want you dead. The following morning, after Benjamin had spent the night in a hotel, I met with my lawyer, Richard Thompson. I'd known Richard for 20 years. He'd handled my divorce long ago and had helped me build my company. I need to see my will, I told him without preamble. His bushy eyebrows rose in surprise. Any particular reason, Margaret? Just show me, Richard, please. He pulled out the file, and together we reviewed the document I hadn't thought about in years. As I read, my blood ran cold. In the event of my death, my estate, the company, our properties, all assets, would pass to Benjamin. But if Benjamin predeceased me, everything would go to his spouse. Clara would inherit everything, my entire life's work. Millions. I need to change this, I said, my voice shaking. Today, Richard studied me carefully. Margaret, what's going on? I told him everything. The lunchbox, the arsenic, the medical tests. By the time I finished, Richard's face was grim. This isn't just a family matter anymore, Margaret. This is criminal. You need to contact the authorities. I need proof first. Real proof that it's... Clara, Benjamin won't accept anything less. Richard sighed heavily. What do you have in mind? I'm going to change my will, as we planned for the trap. But I'm also making real changes. I'm creating a foundation to protect families against hidden domestic betrayals. And I'll need your help to gather evidence. As I left Richard's office, my phone rang. It was Clara. Margaret, I'm so worried, she said, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine concern. Benjamin left for Chicago so suddenly, and now he's barely answering my calls. Is everything all right at work? Did something happen? I closed my eyes, steadying myself against the wave of revulsion that washed over me. Had she been planning this all along? Every smile, every kind gesture, every time she called me Mom, had it all been part of a calculated plan? Everything's fine, Clara, I lied, matching her performance with one of my own. Just a client crisis. You know how Benjamin gets when he's focused on work. I miss him, she said softly. The house feels empty without him. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? I suggested, surprising myself with the invitation. No sense in both of us eating alone. I'd love that, Clara replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. As I ended the call, I realized my hands were shaking. Tonight, I would sit across from the woman who had been slowly poisoning my son, who had infiltrated our lives with calculated precision. I would smile and talk and pretend I didn't know what she had done. Because to protect Benjamin, to gather the evidence we needed, I had to play the game better than Clara ever could. And as I drove home, a cold determination replaced my fear. If Clara wanted a war, she had chosen the wrong mother to fight. Dinner with Clara that evening was the most difficult performance of my life. My kitchen, once a sanctuary of warm family gatherings, now felt like a stage for a deadly charade. I watched her hands carefully as she helped me prepare the meal, wondering how many times those same delicate fingers had measured out poison for my son. I made some of Benjamin's favorite pasta, Clara said, chopping basil with practiced precision, but he left before we could eat it. That's thoughtful of you, I replied, forcing warmth into my voice. He's always appreciated how you take care of him. Clara smiled, that same innocent smile I'd trusted for 3 years. It's the least I can do. Benjamin gave me everything I've ever wanted. Not everything, apparently. The company, the houses, the millions, those she hadn't gotten yet. We ate at the kitchen island, Clara asking about my day with seemingly genuine interest. I fabricated details about board meetings and production issues, all while studying her. Was there something I had missed? Some sign that should have warned me about the monster beneath that perfect exterior? You know, Clara said, twirling pasta on her fork. I've been thinking about the future a lot lately. My spine stiffened. Oh? Benjamin and I have been trying for a baby, as you know, but I've also been wondering about the business. Has Benjamin ever expressed interest in taking over Wallace Fragrances someday? The question hung in the air between us. Had she always been this transparent? Or was I now seeing manipulation where I'd once seen only innocent conversation? Benjamin has his own career, I said carefully. But of course, Wallace Fragrances is his inheritance, his future. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculation? Greed? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. It's an incredible legacy you've built, she said, reaching to squeeze my hand. I hope I can help preserve it in whatever way possible. By killing my son? By taking everything I'd worked for? I squeezed her hand back, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat. Family is everything to me, Clara. I'd do anything to protect it. Her smile didn't waver. As would I. After dinner, Clara helped clean up, then hugged me goodbye at the door. As her arms wrapped around me, I wondered if she could feel the rapid beating of my heart, the tension in my shoulders. Thank you for dinner, Mom, she said, using that name that had once meant so much. It helps not to be alone when Benjamin's away. When she left, I locked the door and sank to the floor, my legs finally giving out beneath me. For the next hour, I sobbed. For my son, for the trust that had been violated, for the daughter-in-law I thought I had but never did. Then I wiped my tears and called Inspector Carter Hayes. Inspector Hayes was a friend of David's, a serious man with dark eyes that missed nothing. When I finished explaining the situation in his office the next morning, he leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Mrs. Wallace, these are extremely serious allegations. I know, I said. That's why I need your help to prove them. Your son's medical tests confirm arsenic poisoning, but proving who administered it is another matter entirely, he explained. We need irrefutable evidence. Benjamin joined us, looking exhausted. He'd spent another night in a hotel, wrestling with the betrayal of the woman he loved. What do you propose? He asked, his voice hollow. Inspector Hayes outlined his plan. With our consent, they would install hidden cameras in both my kitchen and Benjamin's. They would monitor Clara's movements, test food samples, and build a case that would stand up in court. And I need to go home, Benjamin said. I need to act normal around her. My heart clenched. It's too dangerous. It's necessary, Inspector Hayes countered gently. But we'll take precautions. Benjamin won't consume anything Clara prepares. We'll have officers nearby at all times. Benjamin looked at me, determination hardening his features despite his pain. I need to know, Mom. I need to see it with my own eyes. That afternoon, while Clara was at her volunteer job at the local library, a perfect activity, for her cultivated image as a caring community member, police technicians installed tiny cameras throughout Benjamin's house. They focused on the kitchen, the bathroom medicine cabinet, and Clara's home office. Benjamin returned home that evening with his fabricated story about the Chicago client. I watched from Inspector Hayes' surveillance van as Clara embraced my son on their doorstep, her face a picture of loving relief. I missed you so much, she said, clinging to him. Benjamin's arms wrapped around her, his face over her shoulder revealing the anguish he hid from her. I missed you too. For the next week, we watched and waited. Benjamin found excuses not to eat at home, late meetings, business dinners, stomach bugs. Clara's concern appeared genuine, but we began to notice patterns. She insisted on preparing his coffee each morning. She regularly added supplements to his smoothies. And most damning of all, we observed her opening a small, unlabeled container from a hidden compartment in her jewelry box and adding its contents to Benjamin's food when he wasn't looking. Inspector Hayes sent officers to collect samples while Clara was out. The tests confirmed our worst fears. Arsenic, administered in carefully increasing doses. It's textbook, David explained as we reviewed the evidence. Small doses over time gradually increased. The victim appears to be suffering from a mysterious illness. By the time anyone suspects poisoning, it's often too late. But why now? I asked. Why suddenly increase the dose so dramatically in that lunchbox? Benjamin, who had been silent, looked up with hollow eyes. The promotion. I told her last week that I was being considered for CEO when Phillips retires next month. It would mean more travel, more visibility, and more difficulty in maintaining the poisoning regimen, Inspector Hayes finished. She's accelerating her timeline. That night, alone in my house, I couldn't sleep. The weight of what we had discovered, of what we still had to do, pressed down on me like a physical force. I wandered into Benjamin's old bedroom, unchanged since his college days. Trophies lined the shelves, photos of father-son fishing trips, the prom picture with his high school sweetheart. How had we come to this? My son sleeping in a hotel, afraid to eat food prepared by his wife. My daughter-in-law revealed as a calculating murderer. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Benjamin. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore. I can't look at her, sleep beside her, knowing what she's done." "We're close, Benjamin," I assured him, wishing I could shield him from this pain. "Inspector Hayes says we have enough for an arrest, but what?" He wants one final piece of evidence, something that makes her intent absolutely clear. The plan was set in motion the next day. Benjamin would fake a collapse at his office. An ambulance would take him to the hospital, where Dr. Levine would pronounce him in critical condition from suspected poisoning. We would see how Clara reacted, what she said when she thought her plan had succeeded. My role was perhaps the most difficult. To call Clara with the news, to bring her to the hospital, to watch her performance while hiding my own knowledge. "Clara?" I said when she answered, forcing my voice to shake with false panic. "It's Benjamin. He's collapsed at work. They've taken him to University of Maryland Medical Center. The doctors, they don't know if he'll—" I let my voice break. "I'm on my way," she said, and I had to admire her acting skills. She sounded genuinely terrified. At the hospital, I met her in the waiting room, embracing her as she rushed in, her face streaked with what appeared to be genuine tears. "What happened?" she demanded. "He was fine this morning. They think it might be poison," I said, watching her face carefully. "They're saying his organs are shutting down." A flicker, just the briefest flash of something other than grief, crossed her features before she collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "No, no, no," she moaned. "Not Benjamin. Not my Benjamin." Dr. Levine approached us, her face appropriately grave. "Mrs. Wallace, both of you can see him now, but I should prepare you. He's unresponsive and we're not optimistic." Clara gripped my hand as we followed Dr. Levine to a private room. Benjamin lay there, apparently unconscious, attached to monitors that had been carefully programmed to show critical readings. Inspector Hayes waited in the adjoining room, watching through a two-way mirror. I hung back at the door as Clara approached the bed. She took Benjamin's hand, her shoulders shaking with sobs. But as the minutes passed and she believed we were alone, her demeanor gradually changed. The sobbing quieted. She straightened her shoulders, and then, leaning close to Benjamin's ear, she whispered words that froze my blood. "Finally, it's over. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but now everything will be as it should." Benjamin's eyes snapped open. Clara stumbled backward with a gasp of shock. "As it should be?" Benjamin asked, his voice steady despite the pain etched across his face. "With me dead and you rich? Is that how it should be, Clara?" The door behind me opened. Inspector Hayes entered, flanked by two officers. "Clara Wallace," he said formally. "You're under arrest for the attempted murder of Benjamin Wallace." Clara's face transformed before our eyes. The mask of loving concern dissolved, replaced by something cold and calculating I'd never seen before. She backed away from Benjamin's bed, eyes darting between us like a cornered animal. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice no longer trembling with emotion but hard with defiance. "Benjamin is obviously fine. What kind of sick game are you playing?" Inspector Hayes stepped forward. "Mrs. Wallace, we have video evidence of you adding arsenic to your husband's food. We have medical tests confirming arsenic poisoning, and we just witnessed your reaction to believing he was dying. You set me up, she whispered, looking at Benjamin with newfound hatred. You pretended, like you've been pretending for 3 years? Benjamin interrupted, sitting up fully now. Pretending to love me while slowly killing me? Something in Clara seemed to break. Her shoulders slumped, and a strange smile twisted her lips. You have no idea what it's been like, she said softly. Playing the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, always smiling, always accommodating. Do you know how exhausting that is? I found my voice at last. Why, Clara? Why Benjamin? Why us? She turned to me, and I barely recognized the woman who had called me Mom just days ago. It was never supposed to be Benjamin, she said, her voice eerily calm. It was supposed to be you first. The room fell silent. Even Inspector Hayes looked stunned. Me? I whispered. You were the primary target, she continued, as if discussing a business strategy rather than murder. I researched you for months before I arranged to meet Benjamin, the successful widow with the perfect son and the growing company. The only obstacle was your health. You were too vital, too strong. It would have looked suspicious if you suddenly fell ill. Benjamin's face had gone pale. You targeted our family? You pursued me deliberately? Clara's laugh was hollow. Oh, Benjamin, did you really think someone like me would fall for someone like you naturally? You were a means to an end, a path to your mother's fortune. Her words struck Benjamin like physical blows. I moved to his side, gripping his hand. So you switched targets, Inspector Hayes said, professional despite the horror of her confession. From mother to son. Clara nodded, her composure chilling. Margaret's will was perfect. Everything to Benjamin, but if Benjamin died before her, everything to his spouse. Me. So much cleaner that way. No one questions when in doubt I do. Older woman leaves everything to her son's widow, especially when that son died tragically young. And you thought you'd get away with it? I asked, astounded by her confidence. People see what they want to see, Margaret, she replied, using my name for the first time in years. You certainly did. The devoted wife, the loving daughter-in-law. Who would suspect me? She turned to Benjamin. And you were so easy to manipulate, so desperate for someone to take care of you after Daddy died. An officer stepped forward with handcuffs. Clara didn't resist as they restrained her, reading her rights. As they led her away, she looked back at me one last time. You know the saddest part, Margaret? I actually liked you. In another life, we might have been friends. The door closed behind them, leaving Benjamin and me in stunned silence. Dr. Levine entered, checking Benjamin's vital signs. He'll need to stay overnight for observation, she told me. The arsenic needs to clear his system completely. I nodded, unable to speak, still processing Clara's confession. When we were alone again, Benjamin broke down. Great, heaving sobs racked his body as 3 years of lies and betrayal crashed over him. I held him as I had when he was a child, murmuring reassurances that felt hollow in the wake of such calculated evil. How could I not have known? He asked between sobs. How could I have been so blind? She fooled all of us, I said, stroking his hair. She was very, very good at what she did. I loved her, Mom. God help me. Part of me still does. Those words broke my heart, all over again, because I understood. Despite everything, I mourned the daughter-in-law I thought I had, the kind, thoughtful woman who had brought joy back into our lives. That woman had never existed, but the grief for her was real nonetheless. The following days passed in a blur of police statements, medical follow-ups, and legal proceedings. Clara's background revealed more horrors, a previous identity, a pattern of befriending wealthy, older individuals who subsequently fell ill, though never fatally. She had refined her methods with each attempt, becoming more sophisticated, more patient. We learned she had accessed my financial records through Benjamin, studied my will through his home office, and researched arsenic poisoning extensively. The level of premeditation was staggering. The buyer media caught wind of the story, of course. Black Widow of Bethesda, screamed the headlines. Reporters camped outside my house and Benjamin's. Our phones rang constantly. The perfume company's stock dipped briefly before rebounding. Through it all, Benjamin and I clung to each other. We declined interviews, issued a brief statement through Richard, and focused on healing. One evening, about a week's after Clara's arrest, Benjamin came to my house for dinner. I cooked myself, a simple meal of his childhood favorites. As we ate, I noticed him watching me with a thoughtful expression. "What?" I asked, self-consciously touching my face. "I was just thinking about how close we came to losing everything," he said quietly. If David hadn't recognized the arsenic that day, I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. But he did. And we're still here. Benjamin nodded slowly. "I want to do something, Mom. Something good that comes from all this horror." "What did you have in mind?" "The changes you made to your will. The foundation for victims of domestic betrayal. I want to help build it. Make it real. Create something that might help others recognize what we missed." Warmth spread through my chest, pride in my son's resilience, mingling with the profound gratitude that he was alive to have this conversation. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said. "We could start small, a hotline maybe, or an education program." Benjamin smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Clara thought she would destroy us. Instead, we'll help save others." As we continued planning that evening, I felt a shift in the atmosphere of my home. The shadow that had hung over us began to recede, not disappearing entirely, but becoming something we could live with, something we could learn from. Life would never be the same. Trust would be harder to give, but we were survivors. And sometimes surviving is its own kind of triumph. The courthouse stood imposing. Against the autumn sky, its classical columns and stone steps teeming with reporters and curious onlookers. 6 months had passed since Clara's arrest, and today marked the beginning of her trial. Benjamin and I arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance arranged by the district attorney to avoid the media circus. The prosecution had built what they called an airtight case: video, evidence, medical testimony, financial records showing Clara's research into my company's value, and most damning of all, her own confession in Benjamin's hospital room. Despite this, she had pleaded not guilty, hiring a high-powered defense team that specialized in creating reasonable doubt. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Benjamin as we waited in a small conference room. The past months had, aged him. The betrayal had carved new lines around his eyes, and streaks of gray now appeared at his temples. But there was also a newfound strength in his bearing, a resilience forged in the crucible of Clara's deception. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, straightening his tie. "I just want it over with. I want to look her in the eye one last time, and then move on with my life." The district attorney, Vanessa Chen, joined us with final preparations. A sharp-minded woman with an impressive record, she had taken a personal interest in our case. "Clara's defense will try to paint her as the victim," Chen warned us. "They'll claim she suffered from mental illness, that she was coerced by someone else, that she herself was being poisoned. Anything to create doubt. Are you both prepared for that?" I nodded, though my stomach churned at the thought. Benjamin simply stared straight ahead, his jaw set firmly. When we entered the courtroom, Clara was already seated at the defense table. She wore a modest navy blue dress, her hair pulled back in a simple style that made her appear younger, vulnerable. Gone was the fashionable, confident woman who had been my daughter-in-law. In her place sat someone designed to evoke sympathy from the jury. She turned as we entered, and our eyes met. No recognition flickered there, no remorse, no shame. She might have been looking at strangers. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out a compelling narrative of calculation and betrayal. Clara's attorney countered with a tale of a troubled young woman, traumatized by her own past, seeking love and acceptance in all the wrong ways. I was called to testify first. As I took the stand and swore to tell the truth, I looked out at the packed courtroom, at the faces hungry for drama and suffering. My suffering. Benjamin's suffering. "Mrs. Wallace," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant prior to her arrest." I took a deep breath. "I thought of her as my daughter," I said simply. "The child I never had. I trusted her completely." "And when did you first suspect something might be wrong?" I recounted that fateful day in my office. David's horrified reaction to Benjamin's lunch, our frantic race to the hospital, the devastating confirmation of arsenic poisoning. As I spoke, I avoided looking at Clara, focusing instead on telling my story clearly and calmly. When the defense attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach was immediately confrontational. "Mrs. Wallace, isn't it true that you were initially reluctant to accept Clara into your family?" "No, that's not true. I welcomed her from the start." "Really?" "Because we have witnesses who say you expressed concerns about the speed of their relationship, That you worried she might be after Benjamin's connection to your wealth. I felt heat rise in my face. Like any mother, I was protective. But those concerns faded quickly as I got to know her. Or thought I did. Isn't it possible, Mrs. Wallace, that your initial distrust never really went away? That you were looking for reasons to remove Clara from your son's life? Objection, Chen called. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge ruled. The defense attorney smiled thinly. Mrs. Wallace, who stands to benefit most from Clara's conviction? The question hung in the air. I met his gaze steadily. Justice benefits. My son, who nearly died by her hand, benefits by staying alive. But also you, correct? Your company remains under your control. Your son remains devoted to you alone. The interloper is removed. I felt a flash of anger break through my composure. My son nearly died, I repeated, my voice rising slightly. Clara systematically poisoned him for months, perhaps years. She confessed to targeting our family specifically for our money. Those aren't allegations. They're facts supported by evidence. The defense attorney's smile didn't waver. Facts as you see them, perhaps. When I finally stepped down, my legs trembled so badly I wasn't sure they would carry me back to my seat. Benjamin squeezed my hand as I sat beside him, his touch anchoring me. David testified next about recognizing the signs of arsenic poisoning, followed by Dr. Levine with her medical evidence. The defense tried to suggest alternative explanations for Benjamin's symptoms, work stress, environmental factors, even self-administration, but the medical testimony stood firm. Benjamin's testimony on the second day was the most difficult to watch. He spoke of falling in love with Clara, of building what he thought was a life together, of the gradual onset of mysterious symptoms that left him weakened and confused. His voice broke only once, when describing the moment in the hospital when he opened his eyes to hear Clara's whispered words of triumph over what she thought was his deathbed. I loved her completely, he said, looking directly at Clara for the first time. I would have given her everything freely. She didn't need to try to kill me. Clara's face remained impassive, as if he were speaking about someone else entirely. The prosecution's case continued with forensic evidence, financial records, and the damning surveillance footage showing Clara adding white powder to Benjamin's food on multiple occasions. But it was Inspector Hayes' testimony about Clara's background that truly silenced the courtroom. He revealed what the investigation had uncovered. Clara Wallace had been born Olivia Simmons in a small town in Oregon. She had changed her name at 18, erasing a troubled past that included juvenile records sealed by the court. She had moved methodically through 3 cities, each time befriending wealthy older individuals who subsequently experienced mysterious health problems. None had died, but one remained in a care facility with permanent neurological damage. We believe, Inspector Hayes testified, that the defendant was refining her methods with each victim, learning from previous mistakes. Benjamin Wallace represented her most sophisticated attempt yet. Throughout this testimony, I watched Clara. For the first time, her composure slipped. A muscle twitched in her jaw. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. She leaned to whisper something to her attorney, who shook his head firmly. When Clara finally took the stand in her own defense, she had regained her mask of vulnerability. She spoke softly, her eyes downcast, occasionally dabbing at non-existent tears. She claimed to have been abused as a child, to have suffered from untreated mental illness, to have sought only love and security with Benjamin. She admitted to changing her name but claimed it was to escape an abusive ex-boyfriend. She denied any knowledge of arsenic or poisoning attempts. I loved Benjamin, she said, her voice breaking perfectly. I still do. I would never hurt him. Never. Then how do you explain the video evidence of you adding an unidentified substance to his food? Her own attorney asked, addressing the damning footage directly. Those were supplements, she insisted. Vitamins and probiotics for his digestive issues. Benjamin worked so hard, ate so poorly. I was trying to help him. And your words in the hospital room? When you believed Mr. Wallace was dying? Clara's eyes welled with tears. I was in shock, traumatized. I don't even remember what I said. But if it sounded callous, it was only because I couldn't process what was happening. The cross-examination was brutal. Chen methodically dismantled Clara's story, pointing out inconsistencies, presenting evidence that contradicted her claims, reminding the jury of the medical proof of arsenic in Benjamin's system. Mrs. Wallace, Chen said finally, if these were simply health supplements you were adding to your husband's food, why did you hide them in a secret compartment in your jewelry box? Why add them when he wasn't looking? Why not tell him what they were? Clara had no answer for that. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts, including attempted murder, poisoning, and fraud. As the verdict was read, Clara finally looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time since the trial began. In her eyes, I saw neither remorse nor defeat, but something far more chilling. Calculation. As if she were already planning her next move. The judge sentenced her to 30 years without possibility of parole. As the officers led her away, she turned one last time and mouthed something to Benjamin that only he could see. The color drained from his face. What did she say? I asked him later, as we drove home in silence. She said, "This isn't over." Benjamin replied softly, "But she's wrong. It is over. It has to be." But that night, as I tried to sleep, Clara's final look haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, despite everything, we hadn't seen the last of the woman who had nearly destroyed our family. Spring arrived in Washington, D.C. with an explosion of cherry blossoms and new beginnings. 1 year had passed since Clara's sentencing, and while the legal nightmare was behind us, the emotional aftermath remained. Benjamin had thrown himself into work, accepting the CEO position at his firm when Phillips retired. I had done the same with Wallace Fragrances, expanding into new markets across Europe and Asia. But today wasn't about business. Today was the official launch of the Wallace Foundation for Survivors of Intimate Betrayal, the good we had promised to create from our tragedy. The foundation's headquarters occupied a renovated townhouse in Georgetown, its brick facade freshly painted, its windows bright with sunlight. Inside, a small team of counselors, legal advisors, and outreach coordinators prepared for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. What had begun as a vague idea during our darkest days had evolved into something concrete and hopeful. "Are you nervous?" I asked Benjamin as we stood in the main reception area. He looked healthier than he had in years. The arsenic long cleared from his system, the physical wounds healed. The emotional scars would take longer, but I saw progress in the way he smiled more easily now, in his willingness to attend social events again. "Not nervous," he replied, straightening a framed mission statement on the wall. "Just reflective, I guess, thinking about how we got here." I understood completely. The foundation's creation had been therapeutic for both of us, channeling our pain into purpose. We had developed educational programs to help people recognize signs of betrayal, offered legal assistance to those navigating similar situations, and created support groups for survivors. The work had helped us heal even as we tried to help others. The ceremony itself was small but meaningful. Local officials, mental health professionals, and a few carefully selected media representatives gathered as Benjamin and I cut the ribbon together. The press coverage would be modest but impactful, enough to spread awareness without sensationalizing our personal story again. This foundation exists because we learned firsthand how devastating intimate betrayal can be, Benjamin said in his brief speech. But we also learned that survival is possible, that healing happens, and that helping others is part of that process. I watched him with pride as he spoke confidently to the assembled guests. My son had emerged from the crucible of Clara's. Betrayal not bitter, but determined. Not broken, but remade. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled and explored the facility, David Miller approached me. Since that fateful day when he had recognized the arsenic, David had become an even closer friend, his medical expertise invaluable in establishing the foundation's educational materials. "You've done something remarkable here, Margaret," he said, his eyes crinkling with genuine admiration. "Both of you have." "We couldn't have done it without you," I replied. "If you hadn't been there that day," he shook his head, dismissing the thought. "But I was there. That's what matters." As the afternoon progressed, I found myself drawn to a quiet corner where photos of the foundation's first client families were displayed. Each represented a story of betrayal, survival, and recovery. Each reminded me why this work mattered. "Mom?" Benjamin appeared beside me. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." He introduced me to Sarah Chen, Vanessa Chen's younger sister and the foundation's newest legal advisor. Intelligent and warm, with a quick smile and compassionate eyes, Sarah had specialized in cases involving domestic abuse and financial exploitation. "Your son speaks very highly of you, Mrs. Wallace," Sarah said, shaking my hand. "The work you're doing here is groundbreaking." "Please call me Margaret," I replied, "and the foundation has been a team effort." I noticed something in the way Benjamin looked at Sarah. A warmth, an interest that I hadn't seen since before Clara. My heart both leaped and hesitated. Was it too soon? Would he ever be able to trust again? But then Sarah said something that made Benjamin laugh, a genuine laugh, his head tilted back, his eyes crinkling at the corners. And I decided that questions of timing weren't mine to answer. My son was finding his way forward at his own pace. Later, as the event wound down and the last guests departed, Benjamin and I walked through the quiet rooms of the foundation. Each space had been designed with comfort and safety in mind. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, privacy screens. "Do you think we've done enough?" Benjamin asked suddenly. "To make something good come from what happened?" I considered the question carefully. "I think we've made a start," I said finally. "And sometimes that's the most important part. Just beginning." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with that answer. "I've been thinking about Clara," he admitted. Not in a pining way, but trying to understand. "Have you reached any conclusions?" "Only that some mysteries don't have satisfying answers. Some people are broken in ways we can't fix or even fully comprehend." His insight surprised me, though it shouldn't have. Benjamin had always been perceptive, even as a child. Clara's betrayal had only sharpened that quality. "The important thing," I said, squeezing his arm, "is that her brokenness didn't break you. Not permanently." That evening, we celebrated with a quiet dinner at my house. Just Benjamin, David, Richard, Inspector Hayes, and a few others who had helped us through the ordeal. As we shared food and wine, trading stories and plans for the Foundation's future, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared. Clara's shadow still fell across our lives in unexpected moments. A hesitation before trying a new dish. A flinch at certain phrases she used to say. The way Benjamin still checked his food when he thought no one was watching. But we were learning to live with those shadows, to recognize them without being controlled by them. After dinner, as Benjamin helped me clear the plates, he paused, a half smile playing on his lips. "I invited Sarah to dinner next week," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "Just the two of us." My heart swelled. "I think that's wonderful." "It's not a date," he added quickly. "Just colleagues getting to know each other better." "Of course," I agreed, hiding my smile. "But if it were a date," he continued, his voice uncertain for the first time, "would that be okay? Is it too soon?" I set down the plates I was holding and turned to face him fully. "Benjamin, listen to me. There's no timeline for healing. No schedule for moving forward. You do what feels right when it feels right." He nodded, relief evident in his posture. "I keep thinking I'll see the signs this time. If someone isn't who they seem." "Maybe you will," I said. "We're both more cautious now, more observant. But Benjamin," I touched his cheek gently, "don't let caution become fear. Don't let what Clara did rob you of the chance to be happy again." Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine. The spring air was cool but pleasant, filled with the scent of newly bloomed flowers. In the year since Clara's arrest, I had replanted this entire space, removing the shrubs she had helped me choose, replacing them with new varieties. It was symbolic, perhaps, but the act of digging in fresh soil, of creating something new, had been deeply healing. My phone chimed with a text message from Benjamin. "Thank you for today, for everything. Love you, Mom." Such a simple message, but it brought tears to my eyes. We had survived. We were rebuilding. And in that moment, under a sky full of stars, I allowed myself to believe that the worst was truly behind us, that the foundation we had built, both literal and figurative, would stand strong against whatever came next. I couldn't have known then how wrong I was. How Clara's final words, "This isn't over," would prove prophetic in ways we couldn't imagine. But that revelation would come later. For now, in the quiet of my garden, I savored the peace we had fought so hard to reclaim. 18 months after the Foundation's launch, life had settled into a new normal. The Wallace Foundation had helped dozens of families navigate the aftermath of betrayal, and Benjamin had found unexpected happiness with Sarah Chen. Their relationship had progressed slowly, deliberately, each step taken with careful consideration, rather than the whirlwind romance he'd had with Clara. I, too, had found my footing again. Wallace Fragrances had launched a new line of scents called Renewal, inspired by the journey Benjamin and I had taken from darkness back to light. The fragrance industry had embraced the story behind the collection, and orders were exceeding our most optimistic projections. On a crisp October morning, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office. when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Inspector Carter Hayes. "Inspector," I greeted him, rising from my desk with a smile that faded when I saw his expression. "What's wrong?" Hayes closed my office door before speaking. "Clara Wallace escaped from prison 3 days ago." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I sank back into my chair. "How is that possible? She was in maximum security." "It appears she had help," Hayes said grimly. "Sophisticated help. She manipulated a guard over months, gained access to restricted areas, and slipped out during a shift. Change. We believe someone was waiting for her outside." "Have you told Benjamin?" "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first." I closed my eyes briefly, trying to process this nightmare. "You think she might come after us?" It wasn't a question, but Hayes nodded anyway. "We have no specific threat, but given her history and her final words at the trial, yes, we're concerned. We're placing officers near both your homes and the foundation. I've already spoken to the security team at Benjamin's firm." "She won't come directly," I said, a cold certainty settling in my bones. "That's not how Clara works. She's patient, methodical." Hayes's expression confirmed my fear, which makes her all the more dangerous. "Mrs. Wallace, until we locate her, I need you and Benjamin to exercise extreme caution. No routine patterns, no accepting food or drinks from untrusted sources. Report any unfamiliar faces showing unusual interest." After Hayes left, I sat motionless, staring out my office window at the Potomac. The peace we'd fought so hard to reclaim had been an illusion. Clara's shadow had never truly lifted. It had simply been waiting, growing longer as the sun of our recovery began to set. I called Benjamin immediately, asking him to meet me at home rather than discussing it over the phone. When he arrived, his face told me he already knew. "Hayes called you?" I asked. He nodded, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "He has officers watching Sarah too, just in case." "Good," I said, relieved. "Benjamin, we need to be smart about this. Clara won't make the same mistakes. Twice. I should never have let her threats get to me," he said bitterly. "At the trial, when she said it wasn't over, I should have taken it more seriously." "We both should have," I admitted. But we wanted to move on. For the next week, Benjamin stayed at my house. The property's security system had been upgraded after Clara's arrest, making it the safest option. Sarah joined us for dinner most evenings, her legal mind helping us think through scenarios and precautions. We altered our routines, drove different routes to work, checked and rechecked our food and drinks. The strain began to show. Benjamin jumped at shadows. I woke from nightmares where Clara stood over my bed, a vial of poison in her delicate hands. Sarah remained outwardly calm, but I noticed how she scanned every room. Upon entering, how she always kept her back to a wall. 2 weeks after Clara's escape, with no sign of her anywhere, Hayes called with news. "We found evidence she fled the country," he said, his voice crackling over the speakerphone as Benjamin and I listened in my kitchen. "A woman matching her description boarded a flight to Brazil using a stolen passport. Brazilian authorities are cooperating. But Brazil is a big country with porous borders," Benjamin finished. "And Clara is good at disappearing." "Exactly," Hayes confirmed. "We're maintaining the protection detail for now. But honestly, I think she's gone. The evidence suggests this was a long-planned exit strategy, not a revenge mission." After the call ended, Benjamin and I sat in silence. Was it possible? Had Clara truly fled, abandoning any plans for vengeance in favor of freedom? "I don't believe it," Benjamin said finally. "It's too convenient, too incomplete." I understood exactly what he meant. Clara was methodical, patient, and thorough. Leaving loose ends, leaving us alive and well, didn't fit her pattern. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of Clara, no suspicious incidents, the police protection was gradually reduced. We began to resume our normal lives, though with a new vigilance that would likely never fade completely. 1 month after Clara's escape, I received a letter at the foundation office. No return address, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a woman found dead in Rio de Janeiro, apparently from suicide. The woman was unidentified, but the physical description matched Clara. I brought the clipping to Hayes immediately. He frowned, studying it. "Could be legitimate," he said cautiously. "Could also be her way of making us lower our guard. I'll have our contacts in Brazil verify this." "If it is her," I asked, "if she is dead, would it be terrible to feel relieved?" Hayes looked at me with understanding. "After what she did to your family, I'd call it human. 3 days later, Brazilian authorities confirmed the dead woman was not Clara. The mysterious letter had been a false lead, but whether it was Clara's attempt to manipulate us or someone else's cruel joke remained unclear. Another month passed. The holidays approached. Benjamin and Sarah became engaged in a quiet, intimate moment at the Foundation's first anniversary gala. Life continued its forward momentum, though Clara's escape remained an open wound, a splinter under the skin that we couldn't quite remove. Then, on a snowy December evening, as I prepared for a small holiday gathering at my home, the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw a delivery man with a beautifully wrapped package. "Delivery for Margaret Wallace," he called when I used the intercom. "Holiday gift basket from Wallace Foundation supporters." Something felt wrong. The Foundation's address was deliberately unlisted. Only staff and clients had direct access. I hadn't authorized any gift baskets to be sent to my home address. "Please leave it on the porch," I said. "I'm in the middle of something." The delivery man complied, and I watched through the camera as he returned to an unmarked van. I called Hayes immediately, describing the package and my concerns. "Don't touch it," he ordered. "I'm sending a team." The bomb squad arrived within 20 minutes. Using specialized equipment, they determined the package contained no explosives, but recommended caution nonetheless. With proper protective gear, they opened it to reveal an exquisite gift basket, premium chocolates, imported cheeses, and a bottle of rare wine. And buried among the delicacies, a small handwritten note. "Old habits die hard. See." The contents tested positive for multiple toxins. That night, as police once again swarmed my home and fear gripped our family anew, I realized Clara had never intended to disappear completely. The Brazil lead, the false suicide report, the weeks of silence, all I calculated to lower our defenses, to make this moment more devastating. "She's playing with us," Benjamin said as we sat in my kitchen, untouched cups of tea growing cold before us. Sarah held his hand tightly, her lawyer's composure momentarily shaken. "She wants us looking over our shoulders forever," I agreed. "Even if she never strikes again, the threat itself is her revenge, the uncertainty." Hayes joined us, his face grim. "We're reopening the full investigation. The delivery service was legitimate, but they were given the package by a third party. The van's license plate was stolen. The delivery man had no idea what he was carrying." "So we're back to waiting," Benjamin said bitterly. "Back to jumping at shadows." But that night, as I lay awake in my bedroom, a thought formed, slowly. At first, then, with increasing clarity. Clara's methods had always been indirect, patient, poisonous. But what if we forced her hand? What if, instead of waiting for her next move, we made one of our own? The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Benjamin, Sarah, Hayes, and David Miller. In my dining room, with security sweeping for listening devices and officers stationed outside, I outlined my plan. "We need to draw her out," I said. "On our terms, not hers." Hayes frowned. "That's extremely dangerous, Mrs. Wallace. More dangerous than waiting for her to poison another gift basket, one we might not catch in time," I countered. "Clara thrives on control and calculation. If we disrupt her planning, force her into a reactive position, she might make a mistake." "What exactly are you proposing?" Sarah asked, her legal mind already analyzing angles and risks. I took a deep breath. "We announced that I'm stepping down from Wallace Fragrances, that I'm transferring all assets to Benjamin and Sarah upon their marriage. We make it public, high profile." Benjamin's eyes widened as he understood. "You want to use yourself as bait." "Clara's original target was always me," I said quietly. "Benjamin was just a means to an end. If she believes I'm transferring everything, that her years of planning will culminate in the very outcome she wanted, she might come for you directly," Hayes finished. "It's too risky." "Not if we control every variable," I insisted. "Not if we're prepared." David, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Margaret, I understand why you're suggesting this, but I have to agree with the inspector. Clara isn't just dangerous because she's methodical. She's dangerous because she's adaptive, unpredictable when cornered." I looked around the table at the concerned faces of the people I loved most. "I'm not asking permission," I said gently. "I'm asking for help to do this as safely as possible. Clara will never stop hunting us from the shadows. This may be our only chance to end this for good." Slowly, reluctantly, they began to see the logic in my plan. Over the next week, we refined the details with military precision. Every contingency was planned for, every escape route mapped, every security measure doubled and triple-checked. On January 15th, Wallace Fragrances issued a press release announcing my retirement and the transfer of company control to Benjamin upon his upcoming marriage. Exclusive interviews were arranged with major business publications. The foundation announced a gala celebration to mark both occasions. And then we waited for Clara to take the bait. The Wallace Foundation Gala was held at the Meridian House, a historic mansion in the diplomatic quarter of Washington, D.C. Its neoclassical architecture and formal gardens provided both elegance and, more importantly, controlled access points that Hayes's team could monitor. I wore a midnight blue gown and my favorite pearls, Robert's last gift to me before his death. Benjamin and Sarah greeted guests at the entrance, a picture of young love and promise. David Miller stayed close to my side throughout the evening, his medical training. An added layer of security should Clara attempt another poisoning. 200 guests filled the grand hall, business associates, foundation supporters, and carefully vetted +1s. Undercover officers circulated among them, eyes constantly scanning for Clara's face or any suspicious behavior. The catering staff had been thoroughly screened, the food and drinks tested multiple times. As I gave my speech announcing the official transfer of company leadership to Benjamin and Sarah, I scanned the crowd, wondering if Clara was watching, if she had somehow infiltrated our defenses. The weight of the small panic button in my evening bag pressed against my side, a constant reminder of the danger we had deliberately invited. Some of you know the challenges my family has faced, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Those challenges taught us that legacy isn't just about wealth or status. It's about values, purpose, the courage to rebuild when everything you believed has been shattered. The crowd applauded politely, unaware of the true significance behind my words, unaware that every entrance and exit was being monitored, that snipers were positioned on neighboring rooftops. After my speech, as guests mingled and champagne flowed, I felt a strange prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Years of business negotiations had honed my intuition, and something felt off balance in the room. I scanned the faces again, looking for anyone whose attention seemed too focused, too intent. And then I saw her. Not Clara herself, but a server I hadn't noticed earlier. A, woman with dyed blonde hair and colored contacts who moved with a familiar grace as she collected empty glasses. She was heavier than Clara had been, her face subtly altered with expertly applied makeup, but the way she tilted her head as she listened, the precise economy of her movements, I would recognize those anywhere. I caught Hayes's eye across the room and gave the prearranged signal, touching my pearl necklace twice. He followed my gaze, then discreetly spoke into his wrist microphone. The plan called for me to stay put, to let the officers move into position. But as the disguised server slipped through a side door toward the kitchen, a terrible certainty gripped me. If we lost her now, she would disappear again, and the nightmare would never end. I murmured an excuse to David and followed, ignoring his alarmed expression. The kitchen was a flurry of activity. Chefs plating desserts, servers arranging trays. I scanned the room but saw no sign of the blonde woman. A door at the back of the kitchen stood slightly ajar, leading to the mansion's formal gardens. I pushed through it, stepping into the cold January night. The gardens were lit by small lanterns along the pathways, creating pockets of golden light amid deep shadows. "I knew you'd follow me," came a voice from the darkness. "You always were smarter than Benjamin." Clara stepped into the light of a nearby lantern. Even with the disguise, I could now see her clearly. My former daughter-in-law, the woman who had infiltrated our lives with such calculated precision. "Hello, Clara," I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the fear coursing through me. I pressed the panic button in my bag, alerting Hayes to my location. "Or should I call you Olivia?" She smiled, and the expression was chillingly familiar, the same smile that had greeted me over countless family dinners. "I've had so many names. Clara suited me best, I think." "Why are you here?" I asked, playing for time. "To kill me. To finish what you started. To witness my victory," she replied, circling slowly around me. In her hand, I noticed a small object, not a weapon, but a remote control of some kind. "Do you really think I'd risk coming in person if I just wanted you dead? The gift basket would have sufficed if you hadn't been so cautious." "Then why?" "Because I wanted to see your face when you realized you've lost. That fancy security, those police snipers, they're looking for a threat to you. But that's not my plan anymore." Cold dread washed over me. "What have you done?" "Nothing yet," she said, her finger hovering over the remote. But in about 30 seconds, the vintage champagne being served to the happy couple will release a colorless, odorless compound. Not fatal. I've refined my methods since our last encounter. Just enough to cause organ damage over time. Untraceable. Deniable. I lunged for her. All thoughts of caution abandoned. Clara sidestepped easily, her training evident in her movement. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said, genuine curiosity in her voice. This was never just about money. It was about taking what matters most to you, watching you suffer as I did. As you did? I repeated, confusion momentarily replacing fear. What did we ever do to you? Something flickered in Clara's eyes, a glimpse of genuine pain beneath the calculated malice. Not you, my mother, the woman who built a company, who had everything, who threw me away like I was nothing. Understanding dawned, terrible and complete. You're recreating some trauma from your past, using us as stand-ins. Clever Margaret, she mocked, always figuring things out just a little too late. I heard footsteps approaching from the mansion. Hayes and his team, responding to my panic signal. Clara heard them too, her head turning slightly. "They're coming for you," I said, taking a step closer. "It's over, Clara. Really over this time." She smiled again, raising the remote. Not quite. In that moment, I made a decision, not calculated or strategic, but instinctive, maternal. I threw myself at Clara with all my strength, knocking her backward onto the stone pathway. The remote flew from her hand as we fell. Clara recovered quickly, her disguise hiding a body kept fit during her time in prison. She struck out, her fist connecting with my jaw, sending pain shooting through my skull. But I held on, grappling for the remote even as she fought to throw me off. "Margaret!" David's voice called from the pathway. "Hayes is securing the ballroom!" Clara's momentary distraction was all I needed. I pinned her arm with my knee, stretching to reach the remote that had skidded just beyond her fingertips. As my hand closed around it, Clara changed tactics, her voice suddenly pleading. "You don't understand what they did to me," she said, her eyes filling with tears that looked remarkably genuine. "How they abandoned me, how they made me into this. I just wanted what was mine." For one heartbeat, I hesitated, recognizing the broken humanity beneath her monstrous actions. Then I remembered Benjamin in the hospital, his body weakened by months of poisoning. I remembered the fear that had shadowed our lives for 2 years. "It was never yours," I said quietly. "And whatever happened to you, it didn't give you the right to destroy my family." Officers surrounded us then, pulling Clara away, securing her hands behind her back. As they led her toward the waiting police vehicle, she looked back at me one last time. "We could have been family," she said, and for the first time I heard something like regret in her voice. In another life, I agreed softly. Perhaps we could have. Inside, the gala had been transformed into an organized chaos of security protocols. The champagne had been secured before anyone could drink it, and preliminary tests confirmed Clara's claim about the compound it contained. Benjamin rushed to me as I re-entered the ballroom, his face pale with fear. "Mom, are you hurt? When Hayes said you were outside with her?" "I'm fine," I assured him, though my jaw throbbed where Clara had struck me. "It's over, Benjamin. Really over this time." Sarah joined us, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. "The guests are being told there was a security threat that's now been contained. Most don't realize what actually happened." "And Clara?" Benjamin asked, his voice tight. "In custody," I said, "with new charges that will ensure she never walks free again." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the police had taken their statements, Benjamin, Sarah, David, and I gathered in my living room. The emotional adrenaline was fading, leaving behind an exhaustion so profound it seemed to seep into our bones. "I still don't understand," Sarah said, curled beside Benjamin on the sofa. "What drove her to such elaborate schemes, such hatred?" "I think in her mind she was reclaiming something," I said slowly, remembering the glimpse of genuine pain I'd seen in Clara's eyes. Something she believed had been stolen from her. "But we never took anything from her," Benjamin protested. "No," I agreed, "but someone did. And we became the substitutes in her narrative. The wealthy family, the successful mother, the devoted son. She cast us in a play we didn't know we were performing." David, who had insisted on examining my bruised jaw, looked up thoughtfully. "Trauma shapes us in ways we don't always recognize. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it might explain the relentlessness of her Pursuit. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, then said, "When I asked her once about her family, early in our relationship, she told me they had died in a car accident. I never questioned it. Because that's what people do," I said gently. "We trust. We believe. Those aren't weaknesses, Benjamin. They're what make us human." The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom. Windows. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't immediately scan the room for threats. Didn't hesitate before reaching for the water glass on my nightstand. The weight that had pressed on my chest since the day David recognized the arsenic seemed, finally, to have lifted. Benjamin and Sarah arrived for breakfast, bringing fresh pastries and coffee. As we ate together in my kitchen, our conversation turned from Clara to the future, the wedding plans, the foundation's upcoming projects, Benjamin's vision for Wallace Fragrances. "I've been thinking," I said, stirring my coffee, "about what legacy really means." They looked at me expectantly. Clara wanted our wealth, our status. She thought that was the inheritance that mattered. But watching you two plan your lives together, seeing the foundation help families heal, I realized the true legacy isn't in the company or the bank accounts. It's in how we live, Benjamin finished, reaching for my hand. How we love, how we recover when life breaks us apart. Exactly, I smiled, squeezing his fingers. And no one can poison that. In the weeks that followed, Clara faced a new trial. This time she offered no performance of vulnerability, no pretense of innocence. She pleaded guilty to all charges, accepting a life sentence without possibility of parole. Whether this represented genuine remorse or simply a strategic decision, we would never know. Benjamin and Sarah were married in the spring, a joyful ceremony in the same garden where Clara and I had had our final confrontation. The space had been reclaimed, replanted with new flowers, new possibilities. At the reception, David asked me to dance, his friendship having deepened into something that might, with time and healing, become more. As we moved across the floor, I caught sight of Benjamin and Sarah, their faces alight with the kind of happiness that can only come after knowing profound pain. "They'll be all right," David said, following my gaze. "Yes," I agreed. "We all will." Later, as Benjamin and Sarah prepared to leave for their honeymoon, my son pulled me aside for a private moment. "I never thanked you," he said softly. "Not properly, for saving my life, for fighting for us." "That's what mothers do," I replied simply. "We protect what we love." He hugged me tightly. The boy who had nearly been taken from me, the man who had survived and thrived despite it all. As they drove away amid a shower of rose petals and well wishes, I stood on the steps with David beside me, watching the car disappear around the corner. The path ahead would not be without challenges. Trust would always come a little harder for Benjamin. Vigilance would always be my companion. But we had emerged from the darkness with our humanity intact. Clara had sought to destroy us using the most intimate of weapons, trust. She had weaponized love, turned care into poison. But in doing so, she had inadvertently taught us the most valuable lesson, that true strength lies not in avoiding vulnerability, but in how we rise after betrayal, how we rebuild what was broken, how we choose love even after experiencing its darkest perversion. That evening, as the sun set over Washington, D.C., I stood in my garden among the new blooms, breathing in the scent of renewal. The lunchbox that had started it all, the simple mix-up that had saved Benjamin's life, now sat on a shelf in the Foundation's headquarters, a reminder that sometimes fate works through the smallest of accidents. Trust is a treasure, but never blind. Protect those you love, and never let ambition destroy what truly matters. This is the wisdom I carry forward, not as a burden, but as a light.